We are starting chapter 14, and this chapter is all about voting methods. And this is a really cool section where what we're going to look at is a different style of voting, where as opposed to a voter, say, looking at a list of candidates and just picking one person, what we're going to instead have, we're going to learn different ways of determining a winner, where each voter fills out a preference ballot. And what a preference ballot is what they're going to do is they rank their choices. So they rank the candidates as their first choice, second choice, third choice, so on and so forth, until they've listed everybody. And it turns out that the methods for picking a winner can vary drastically. There's lots of different voting systems, voting methods that we can use to try and pick a winner once we get all of those ballots collected. And what we're going to see is that different methods have different kind of pros and cons. And we're going to look at those and see how even in the same election where people turn in the exact same ballots, depending on what method you choose to pick a winner, you might end up with very different results, which is interesting. So we are going to use an example to kind of help us out here in the beginning. So the example we're going to use for most of learning these methods is a club is going to order a pizza. So they put it up to the members to choose the topping of the pizza. They give them 4 different choices. So the choices they give are sausage, which I'm just going to use an S to represent pepperoni, which I'll use a P to represent mushrooms, an M and anchovies, and A to represent. And like I said, they have each member fill out a ballot that would then represent what their vote or their preference is. So I wrote down a couple examples of what those ballots could look like. So like, for example, here, I've got Susie's ballot. And so what you'll see is what she has to do is she has to rank her first choice, second choice, third choice, and fourth choice of what toppings she would prefer. So using our little shorthand over there, right, she prefers pepperoni first, and then she would prefer mushrooms second, sausage third, and then her fourth and last choice is anchovies. So that's her preference order, her preference ballot. Another example could look like, say, Jim has a slightly different preference ballot than Susie did. So he prefers sausage first, and then pepperoni, and then mushrooms, and then anchovies. So obviously you can think about a cool thing to think with this is, well, what if you had to fill it out? That kind of helps you understand how the ballot works, right? If you had to choose between these 4, which one would you pick first? Which one would you pick second, third, and fourth? And we are going to assume that you have to pick all the things, so you have to put one topping in each spot. So you have to use all 4 toppings and put them all in a spot. We're going to get to how do we choose a winner. But one of the things that we're going to do first before we choose a winner is just talk about how to organize all this information, right? We're going to have all of these different ballots that people have turned in, and we need to try and find a way to organize them neatly so that we can try and then learn these different methods. So that's what I want to talk about first real quick, and then we'll get into some methods. So up top we see a definition, or at least the start of a definition. It says a group of preference ballots. What we're going to do is we're going to gather them and group them together in a preference table. And what we're going to do in a preference table is in the table, all identical ballots are grouped together. So what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of mentally gather grouping all of the identical ballots together. If we were actually in a full classroom, I'd have people fill out ballots, and then I would have them go kind of table by table and collect their ballots and just put them in piles, right? All the ones that look exactly the same, right? If this was what your preference was, P, M, and then S, and then A, then you would go in this pile is how we would do it. And then what we're going to keep track of is the table is going to mark the number of those ballots. So I'm going to give you an example of what, say, the club's preference table would look like. So often the way that we organize the table is we are going to make a nice big rectangular table, and there's going to be some different labels on it. So way up on top, we're going to have the number of voters. So in this sort of area, we're going to collect those ballots in different columns. Over here, we're going to keep track of sort of what that preference ballot looked like. So what were how many choices did we have? So in this one, we had 4. We had a first choice. We had a second choice. We had a third choice and a fourth choice. So let's suppose that we have some different ballots that come in. Let's suppose that we have a group of people who prefer anchovies first, and then sausage, and then mushrooms and pepperoni last. Now, what we've done is we've collected all those in a pile, so what we're going to do above that column, notice this part just looks a lot like these individual preference ballots that people filled out. But what we did is we put those in a pile, and so let's say that 7 people turned in ballots that looked exactly like that. So they're in a pile, and then now we've got a column where then those are all organized together. Next, we would have, let's say, like people like Jim voted. So Jim put sausage, and then pepperonis, and then mushrooms, and then anchovies. So what we would see then is that in this column here, one of these is Jim's ballot. Right? One of those ballots is this one. This was what Jim had filled out. But other people filled out that way too. Let's say that 4 other people, so a total of 5 people filled out that exact ballot. Then we probably have people who voted other ways. So maybe someone or a group of people put pepperoni and then sausage and then mushrooms and then anchovies. Let's maybe say that 4 people did that. And then in the last column we could put, let's say maybe people put pepperoni and then mushrooms and then sausage and then anchovies last. And maybe we have 2 voters who do that. So notice in that last column, that would be like one of those 2 is Susie's ballot, right? That's exactly what Susie's looked like. So you can think about for yourself, you know, what was your imaginary ballot of how you would have filled this out? Is it one of these 4? If so, you'd be one of those people. If not, then we'd have to add another column. So you can just keep adding columns for as many different variations of topping orders that you get. So what we end up seeing across the top here is these numbers on the top are the number of people who had that specific preference ballot. So this is the number of voters or people with that preference ballot. What this does then is it just kind of collects everybody into this nice organized table. So now when we get into our next video and we start to learn our first voting method of how to pick a winner, which in this case the winner would be what topping are we going to put on our pizza, right? Are we going to put pepperoni on it or are we going to put anchovies on it? What we need to do is this table is going to just help keep track of everything for us so that then we can organize all of this information. So in our next video, we're going to learn our first voting method technique to pick a winner.